Why? Because. Benson. In Ethiopia, a year after we arrived, in the camp in Penudo, we finally started primary school under the trees. Our teachers were Sudanese adults who used charcoal to write the alphabet on empty oil cartons brought by the UN. As we copied the letters in the sand, the teacher walked behind us looking at our handwriting. If he was unhappy with our work, he grabbed our fingers and rubbed them harder into the ground until they were nearly pink, and we felt the tingle of blood trying to jump out. In the first grade, I learned the English alphabet and how to add and subtract. The first English word I liked to say was because. I didn't know exactly what the word meant, but our English teacher said that you always answered the question why with because. During the second year, the UN sent us a few exercise books and pencils. We cut the pencils and 32-page books in half so there was enough for everyone. Our new English teacher was kind and always treated us like his own children as he taught us spelling and reading. But our math teacher hit our fingers with his big, thick blackboard ruler if we missed narrating the multiplication tables. The number of hits depended on how many you missed. We were only given minutes if we wanted to go into the bush for toilet. I was late one day. "You are late," he said. "Why?" I heard the word why and remembered my English teacher had told us that good English speakers always answered why with because. Because. The math teacher kept looking at my mouth and repeated, "Why?" "Because," I repeated. That was all I knew how to say. "Come here and show me your dirty fingers. I want to shake the dust out of them." I knew he was going to hit my fingers even though I'd answered his question. I held up the back of my hand and he hit across my fingers with his big blackboard ruler. My hand was numb with pain. He hit me again harder. I grinned with pain, showing all my teeth. "Ugh, I see you are even smiling at me." "That didn't hurt at all. You should have spoke more English after it. You must learn that word because by itself is insulting." I didn't know that, but his punishment almost made me give up trying to speak English. Mostly what we did at Penudo was wait. We waited for the war to end so we could go home. We waited for more refugees to come and give us news morsels from Sudan. When we weren't looking for food, we waited for food to come. Once in a while, when we saw planes going overhead, we'd yell out, "Look, the white men can fart white smoke into the sky." Once a white man came to the camp in a car. He sat in it holding a beautiful twisted black rope to his ear and talked to it. My friend Nicodemus and I went close to listen. We understood some of the English words the white man was telling into that rope line. That thing talked too. It asked, "Where do you reach today?" "Over." The man answered, "Now living in Gambela today." "Over." We memorized that. Sometimes I pretended to be a vehicle and asked, "Where do you reach today?" Nicodemus would answer back, "Now we are living in Penudo today. Over." Any time we were near girls, we'd tell them we saw the white man talking to his vehicle. That vehicle has big, white, glaring eyes. It saw strange people at a strange place, so the vehicle wanted to know where they were. The vehicle asked the owner, "Where do you live today?" The girls thought that we spoke English well, but in fact that was all we could say. The camp at Penudo grew steadily to over 50,000 people. Our area was mostly boys and only a few adults. Night after night, more adult men disappeared from the camp. People said they went to join an army training camp called Bongo somewhere far off in the hills. They left at night because they didn't want their family or the boys to see and cry after them. In that time, I met only one person at the camp who knew my relatives in Jewel. His name was Kuat, and the army had no use for him because his right leg had been amputated. As it was difficult for him to carry his water and rations, he asked our teacher if I could stay with him for a while. I moved to his house, helping with chores and attending school in the day. I was happy to do that. Kuat liked to talk and tell me stories. I'd been curious about his amputated leg, but didn't want to be rude and ask. He told me that he lost it in a place called Torit Town. "It's an important town," he said. That's where the first war began in 1947, when the students rebelled and were massacred by the government troops. It's been fought over many times since then. That's where I was fighting in 1985, when I was shot in the leg with a machine gun. They couldn't save it. He pointed his walking stick at his stump and cut it off. One day, Kuat asked a neighbor woman, an Anuak, if she would cook something for us. According to Dinka and Anuak culture, a man may always ask a woman to cook if he is hungry. This woman lived with her mother-in-law because her husband was away mining. It was dangerous work. Kuat knew this woman was a good neighbor, but he didn't know much about her mother-in-law. The woman put the white beans on the fire outside and added some meat. She left it with her mother-in-law to look after while she went to pound some maize grains in the neighbor's mortar to make flour. I could see that the mother-in-law was angry or jealous that Kuat had asked her son's wife for food. Maybe she thought that Kuat might like her son's wife. The woman returned with the flour and cooked it with some water. Later, when it was dark and the food was ready, she brought it to us and apologized for being slow in preparing it. We thanked her for her kindness. I set the table, and we were ready for supper that smelled delicious. The woman placed the injera, a soft, thin bread, on the table. We would use the injera to scoop the soup, but Kuat liked to use a spoon because he'd lost 2 of his fingers. I waited for the older people to start first because we were eating from just one bowl. Before I dipped my injera, Kuat found something heavy in the soup with his spoon. He struggled to get it out, thinking that it was a piece of dry meat. "Look what I found in the soup," he said, and lit the torch so that we all saw the creature with 4 legs on his spoon. A salamander. At first we all poked at it and threw it away, but then we picked it up again and called the younger woman to come and see what was going on. She was so surprised and pleaded with us that she'd covered the soup and she didn't know how it had happened. The old woman was peeping out to hear what was going on. At that minute, Kuat started vomiting. We took Kuat back to his house and left him in the bed sleeping. When I left for school the next morning, he said he was cold. When I came home that afternoon, he had been admitted to the hospital in a coma. While Kuat was in the hospital, that old woman tried to run away. She wanted to get rid of Kuat and killed a salamander that was clinging to the wall by hitting it with a stone. Then she threw it into our soup while it was still bleeding. The salamander's blood is poisonous. They arrested her and put her in jail. 3 days later, when Kuat came out from the hospital, he told the police to let her go, saying that it was his fault to ask her son's wife for the food. We boys were not living according to our own free will. Each group of boys had 2 head boys, and the teachers and headmaster in charge of all the boys. One head boy gave us work orders, and the other organized what we ate. At the end of the year, the teachers and headmaster ordered us to rebuild our houses because they wanted them to be strong and safe for the rainy weather. After a year at Panida, we had become more adjusted to our environment in Ethiopia. Life had improved with the food and the education, but always I only thought of home and waited for the day the war would end and I could return to Sudan.